When my son said those words, he didn't shout, he didn't look angry, he said them casually, like stating a fact that had already been decided. I stood there realizing I had slowly become furniture in my own family, useful but unseen, present but not needed. So I did the one thing he never expected. I stopped trying to be remembered and quietly prepared to leave. If the people closest to you believe your absence wouldn't matter, what would you do next? I didn't respond right away when my son said it, because sometimes silence is the only honest reaction left. We were standing in the hallway of his house, the same hallway where I used to help him practice spelling words when he was 7, the same walls that once held crooked drawings he made just to make me smile. Now those walls were bare, repainted in neutral tones that matched the way he spoke to me, distant and practical. He had said it almost absent-mindedly, as if discussing the weather, "If you disappear, no one will miss you," and then he went back to his phone. In that moment, something inside me didn't break, it settled. I realized I had been slowly shrinking for years, adjusting my needs, lowering my voice, convincing myself that being useful was the same as being loved. After my husband died, I moved in with my son believing it was temporary, believing family meant shared space and shared care, but over time my presence became an inconvenience disguised as tolerance. I cooked, cleaned, watched his children when needed, stayed quiet during arguments that weren't mine, and told myself this was what aging gracefully looked like. I remembered my younger years, the version of me who had worked full-time, raised a child alone for years while my husband traveled constantly, the woman who once made decisions without asking permission. Somewhere along the way, I'd traded independence for acceptance, and I wasn't even sure when that happened. The house had rules I hadn't helped create, schedules I had to work around, and conversations that stopped when I entered the room. I told myself it was normal, that grown children had their own lives, but that sentence my son spoke so casually stripped away every excuse I'd been clinging to. That night, lying awake in the small guest room that never quite felt like mine, I replayed his words over and over, not with anger, but with clarity. If my disappearance truly wouldn't matter, then my staying didn't either. Over the next few days, I began to observe instead of participate. I noticed how no one asked where I was going when I left the house, how meals happened without checking if I'd eaten, how decisions were made as if I were already gone. It wasn't cruelty, it was something quieter and harder to confront, indifference. I thought about all the times I'd told myself to be patient, to be grateful I wasn't alone, to not make trouble, and I wondered when survival had replaced self-respect. I started packing slowly, not out of spite, but out of intention, choosing only the things that felt like mine, old photos, books I loved, clothes that carried memories of who I was before I learned to disappear. My son noticed eventually, asking casually where I planned to go, as if it were a short trip. I said I wasn't sure yet, and for the first time, that uncertainty felt honest instead of frightening. There was a strange calm in knowing I was stepping into the unknown by choice, not being pushed there. As I folded my clothes, I asked myself questions I'd avoided for years. What did I want my days to look like? Who was I when no one needed anything from me? And was I brave enough to find out? On my last night in that house, I stood in the doorway one more time, listening to familiar sounds that no longer felt like home, and I understood that leaving wasn't punishment or escape, it was acknowledgement. I wasn't disappearing, I was reclaiming the space I'd slowly given away, but as I closed my suitcase, one question stayed with me, the kind that doesn't demand an answer right away. If I left and built a life that felt whole again, would anyone notice, and more importantly, would I finally notice myself? I left early the next morning, not because anyone asked me to, but because staying any longer would have turned my decision into a plea for permission. The taxi arrived quietly, and I carried my single suitcase down the steps without looking back. My son was already gone to work, and no one noticed I was leaving. That fact stung less than I expected. It confirmed what I already knew. I rented a small furnished room near the edge of town, nothing permanent, just a place where I could breathe without adjusting myself to someone else's routine. The first few days were disorienting. There was no one to cook for, no schedule to accommodate, no reason to stay quiet. I woke up when my body wanted to, ate when I was hungry, walked without telling anyone where I was going. Freedom felt unfamiliar, almost irresponsible, but slowly it began to feel like dignity. I started taking long walks in the afternoon, watching other older adults sit on park benches or move through grocery stores with the same careful independence I now carried. Some looked lonely, others looked peaceful. I realized loneliness wasn't about being alone, it was about being unseen. My son didn't call. Not the first day, not the second, not the third. I told myself that was fine, that I had made this choice for myself, not to provoke guilt or attention. But I would be lying if I said I didn't notice the silence. Weeks passed, and I settled into a rhythm. I joined a local library, signed up for a writing group I'd always been curious about, and began volunteering 2 mornings a week at a community center where no one knew my family history or my sacrifices. There, I was just another woman with time, experience, and something to contribute. People asked my opinion. They remembered my name. One afternoon, my phone finally rang. It was my son. His voice was cautious, confused. He asked where I was, said he hadn't realized I'd left for good, said the house felt strange without me. I listened without interrupting, without filling the silence for him. When he asked why I hadn't said anything before leaving, I told him the truth. I had been speaking for years. He just hadn't been listening. The conversation ended without resolution, but something had shifted. He didn't sound relieved or angry, just uncertain, like someone realizing a truth too late to undo easily. After that, the calls came occasionally. Short, polite, careful. He asked how I was doing. I said I was fine, and again, I meant it. I didn't explain my days or my new routines. I didn't need him to understand everything. Months later, during a visit that felt more like an interview than a reunion, he asked if I planned to come back. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not a villain, not a cruel son, but a man who had grown used to my presence without considering its cost. I told him no. Not because I was angry, but because I had learned something important in my absence. I told him that love isn't proven by endurance alone, and that disappearing had taught me what staying never had. He didn't argue. He nodded slowly, as if absorbing a lesson he hadn't expected. As I watched him leave that day, I felt a quiet sadness, but not regret. I had stopped waiting to be missed and started living as if my life mattered even when no one was watching. And maybe one day, he would understand that my leaving wasn't abandonment, it was survival with boundaries. I didn't disappear. I finally arrived somewhere I could see myself clearly, and that, I realized, was enough.